So just to give you a little background, when we started thinking about planning this meeting, we reached out to several advocacy groups before trying to figure out the best way to put this meeting together. There was one name that came up over and over again, and his name is James Valentine. He's sitting right here. James is a lawyer that specializes in developing novel drugs and is passionate about the rare disease community and now super passionate about CMT. Before private practice, James was at the FDA for 6 years when he worked to incorporate the patient voice into the agency's decision-making, including, among other things, helping to start the PFDD initiative. He's been helping me and the HNF family each step of the way in planning. He's a trusted advisor. Let's welcome James, our moderator of the day.
So I would like to thank all of our speakers this morning for helping set the stage for what is now really the meat of why we're here, to hear from all of you in the CMT and inherited neuropathies community, patients, caregivers, loved ones, to really learn from you, the experts. So I am James Valentine. I will be serving as the moderator for this really what will be the majority of the rest of the day, which is the patient input portion of this patient-focused drug development meeting. So I want to, before we get into that, spend a few moments just orienting you to this meeting that we've planned, so that way you can know what to anticipate as we move through the rest of the program. So the organizers from the Hereditary Neuropathy Foundation really designed this meeting to systematically gather the perspectives of individuals living with CMT and inherited neuropathies, including the perspectives of caregivers on their condition and available treatment options. As you heard from Ms. Chalasani from FDA, your perspective is going to help inform the context for the assessment of the benefit risks of medical products and aid in FDA's decision-making for new drugs, biologics such as gene therapy, and medical devices. This helps both during the development of those products as well as during the review of applications for approval. Not only will FDA officials and other stakeholders that you saw raise their hand that are here around the room be listening to you today, but the Hereditary Neuropathy Foundation will be preparing a summary report, which is called a Voice of the Patient report, that will be submitted to the FDA to further your voice within the agency. So let's talk about how we're going to be working together through the remainder of today. As you'll see in the agenda, the meeting is organized into 3 major topics. The first topic will be looking to understand how your experience with CMT and inherited neuropathies and its daily impacts during childhood years. Our second topic, we're going to explore those same ideas, understanding your experience living with the symptoms and health effects of CMT and inherited neuropathies and its daily impacts, but into adulthood. So we want to understand that transition and the the longer progression effects of CMT. And then finally, our third topic, we'll be exploring current approaches to treating your CMT and inherited neuropathies, as well as asking for your perspectives on future therapy. For each of those 3 topics, you're first going to hear from a panel of patients and caregivers. The purpose of these panels is to set a foundation for our discussion here in the room. The panelists, they reflect a range of experiences of individuals with CMT and inherited neuropathies, and they, again, will set the foundation for our discussion. At the conclusion of the panels, we're then going to broaden the dialogue to help engage with all of you that have joined us here today, both here in the audience as well as those that are on the webcast. The first thing that we'll do with all of you is we're going to give everyone a chance to answer some polling questions. We'll provide you with instructions for how to use your cell phones, tablets, laptops if you have them, to do this over web or by text message. We're going to ask that only patients and their caregivers respond to the majority of those questions. There's a few that will be open to everyone that's here in the room, regardless of what type of stakeholder you are. We will then build on the panel discussion and those polling questions and broaden it with a discussion of all of our patients and caregivers in the audience and on the web. I will ask questions, inviting you to raise your hand to respond. When you're called on, I'll ask you to state your name, and if you're comfortable, your CMT or inherited neuropathy type before answering the question. And similarly, for those that are following along on the webcast, you can submit your comments by email to comments@hnf-cure.org, and we have a webcast moderator who will be summarizing and sharing your feedback throughout the course of these dialogues. Knowing that we only have so much time today and not everyone that might have wanted to be here with us in person or on the web is able to, we will be sending all of our registrants instructions for submitting written comments that, along with all of the input that we hear today, will be incorporated into that summary Voice of the Patient report. So one last topic to cover before we get into our first set of polling questions is I want to go over some ground rules for today. So first and foremost, we are here today to hear from patients and their caregivers, and we encourage all of you to actively participate. Along those lines, FDA, industry, clinicians, and researchers are here to listen. We won't be asking them questions, and we ask that they remain in listening mode throughout these sessions. We ask that you keep the discussion focused on the discussion questions that I'll present. We know that there are many aspects of you and your loved one's journey with CMT, but the questions that we'll be asking were designed specifically to focus on what is most important to our audience, the FDA, and our final ground rule is that the views, of course, that are expressed today are personal, and we expect that there will be differences in experiences and in preferences. And so we request that you please exercise respect for one another. And along those lines, because we only do have so much time here today, please try to be as concise as possible in your remarks so that way we can hear from as many of you as possible. So, without further ado, let's go into our first set of polling questions, which are a set of demographic questions. The first two will be open to everyone, so whether you're from FDA, industry, academia, researchers, patients, caregivers, or advocates, please go ahead and pull out your phone, tablet, laptop. If you're following on the webcast, please answer these questions as well. So what we'll ask you to do, the preferred way to answer these questions is if you pull out your browser, go to www.pollev.com/HNF4, the numeral 4, CMT, and that's displayed right at the top of this slide that you see projected. If you go to that URL, you will be able to see the questions, and they will automatically advance on your screen as you move through these questions. So our first question is a very simple one, I hope, which is, which time zone do you live in? And your options are A, Eastern Time, B, Central Time, C, Mountain Time, D, Pacific Time, or E, none of the above time zones. Now, if you're having any difficulty accessing this URL, please raise your hand and we'll make sure someone can help you. Yes, the URL, which is on the top left of the slide, is www.pollev.com/HNF4 numeral 4 CMT. And please raise your hand if you're having any trouble accessing that. Okay. Okay. I'll give you a few more moments to get in your response. So far, and perhaps not surprisingly, given where this meeting is located, we have a large majority of our participants from the Eastern time zone. However, it looks like we do have representation from each of the other time zones, as well as from those that are not in any of the above listed time zones. Okay, we're going to move on to our next polling question. So again, this one is still open for everybody in the room. And the question is, which of the following describes why you are here today? And your options are because you are a CMT or inherited neuropathy patient, B, because you're a caregiver of a patient, C, because you're a government official, D, a healthcare provider, E, a representative from industry, F, if you're a patient advocate, G, because you're a payer, or H, you are some other stakeholder category. All right, I'll give you a few more moments to get in your response. Hopefully not too hard. Oh, we have a hand. This one need.
Real quick question. If there are two of us using one machine, only one person can respond, right?
That is correct. So the question was, if there's two people using one device, is only one response able to be given? And the answer to that is yes, only one response. Another question?
Those watching online participate in these questions as well?
Yes. Those following along on the webcast, please do respond to these questions. You'll be able to use that same URL to follow along with the polling throughout today's program. Okay. So while some final results are trickling in, it looks like over half of our stakeholders represented today are CMT and inherited neuropathy patients. It looks like we've got some good representation from caregivers as well, followed by industry, patient advocates, some other category. And then we, of course, have our government officials and healthcare providers. It does not look like we have any payers represented with us today. So we're going to move into our additional demographic questions. These are going to be questions for patients and caregivers only from this point forward throughout the meeting. So I want to give you a few instructions about how to answer this. So first, if you are a caregiver, you'll be answering these questions for the patient that you represent. So for example, this question, what is your gender? You'll be answering this in terms of the gender of the patient that you represent. If you are both a caregiver and a patient, please answer only once on behalf of yourself. So if you are both a caregiver and a patient, you'll be answering on behalf of your own self as a patient. And we do encourage, even sometimes this question comes up, if you're a caregiver and the patient that you care for is also here today answering questions, please still do participate in this because we're very interested in the caregiver perspective on CMT and inherited neuropathies as well. So this question is, what is your gender? And the response options are A, male, B, female. And again, we're answering this if you're a patient for yourself or if you're a caregiver for the patient that you represent. All right. It looks like a few final results are trickling in, but it looks like we have a little greater female patient representation here in the room and online today than male, but fairly balanced. We can go to our next polling question. So this one is, what is your age or the age of your loved one? And your options are either A, 12 and under, B, 13 to 19, C, 20 to 26, D, 30 to 39, E, 40 to 49, F, 50 to 59, or G, 60 and older? And what is it, your age or the age of the patient you care for? Nope. Okay. I'll give you just a few more moments to get your response in for this. All right. So it looks like we have a good representation across the different age groups, with our greatest representation at about a quarter each, the 50 to 59 age group and the 60 and greater age group. And then after that, it looks like our next most represented age groups are 13 to 19, 40 to 49, and close behind those, 20 to 29, 12 and under, and 30 to 39. So we really look forward to hearing about your experiences across these age ranges throughout the program today. If we can go to our next polling question. So this is, have you or your loved one ever had genetic testing? A, yes. B, no. All right, well, results are trickling in. Looks like we're almost up to the number of participants we've been having respond. So it looks like somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of you have had genetic testing, while the remainder have not. We can go to our next polling question. This question is, have you been diagnosed with any of the following CMT or inherited neuropathy types, or with another inherited neuropathy? So please review these and select if you have been diagnosed with any of these. The options are A, CMT1A, B, HNPP, C, X-linked, D, CMT1B, E, CMT2A, F, CMT4C, G, CMT2C, H, another type of CMT, or I, another inherited neuropathy. Okay, so it looks like just over half of you are representing someone with CMT1A. It looks like we do have representation from each of the different types of CMT and inherited neuropathy that is listed on the slide. The next greatest categories that are represented are CMT2A and some other type of CMT. We can go to our final demographic polling question, which is, how long did it take you to get a diagnosis for CMT or your inherited neuropathy? The options are A, less than 1 year, B, 1 to 2 years, C, 2 to 4 years, D, 5 to 10 years, E, over 10 years, F, if you're unsure, or G, if you have not been diagnosed with CMT or an inherited neuropathy. There's a question.
At what age was it diagnosed, or once it started the process, how long did it take?
So the question is, are we asking at what age, or from how long from pursuing a diagnosis? And so the answer is the latter. How long did it take you once you started pursuing a diagnosis to get diagnosed? So that could be from when you had symptom onset or perhaps later. Another question?
If you have
Okay, so this question is, if you have been diagnosed with CMT but not a particular type of CMT, how do you respond to this? And it would be from the time of the diagnosis of CMT. Okay. Okay, so it looks like for most of you, it took less than 1 year to get a diagnosis. But for collectively, for many of you, it took much longer. We have good representation from 1 to 2 years, 2 to 4 years, 5 to 10 years, and even over 10 years. There were a small amount of you that were unsure, and no one having said that they have not been diagnosed at all. Okay. So that concludes our demographic polling.